Hi there, kiddos. Miss Hill back at you. This time we are going to jump into this next text, President Lyndon Johnson's Voting Rights Act address. Before we get into that, though, we have some vocabulary we've got to deal with. So as we go through these two vocabulary words, you should have already glued the two words into your notebook, and you'll just add your symbols as we go. So our first word is this word dignity. It's a noun, and dignity is something you can have as a person. If you feel honor and self-respect and just good about yourself, then you usually have dignity. It's like self-worth. We should always treat other people with dignity. We should always treat other people with honor or respect because, again, that makes them feel good. It makes us feel good. I have this kind of heart with hands shaking, showing teamwork. You could use that as your symbol. You could also use a hashtag honor or respect, hashtag treat others well, hashtag self-worth. Any of those could work. The other word we're going to see today in the text is the word ingenious. This is an adjective. You've probably heard of the noun version, just genius, right? Like Albert Einstein. But ingenious is an adjective. We can call someone, oh, you're a very ingenious person, especially if they're clever or resourceful. Our example sentence says, I read a story about an ingenious detective who solved a difficult case. So you could have the guy with the little light bulb over his head. You can have your hashtag Einstein if you wanted to, hashtag clever. But either way, get those finished in your notebook, and then we can look at the text. Oh, before we get into the text, let's review our anchor chart about important versus unimportant info. So we know in order to find the important info, we got to know what the topic is and what is the author's purpose. Looking at this, though, when we talk about the Voting Rights Act address, we're not talking about where it lives, right? Like your house has an address, but this is different. In this sense, address is just another word for a speech. So this was actually a speech given by President Lyndon B. Johnson about the Voting Rights Act. So because it's a speech, that makes it really easy to know what the purpose is. Anytime somebody gives a speech, it's because they feel very strongly about something. And so this speech, the purpose is to persuade, to convince the people he's giving the speech to that he's right and they should agree with him. And he was giving the speech to Congress to convince them to pass the Voting Rights Act. So now that we know kind of the topic and we know the purpose, we can really get into the text. And then as I go, I'm going to underline that information that connects right back to this topic. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to kind of take it a couple steps further today. And after we have our important information, we're going to summarize and synthesize. So when we summarize, we combine the most important information and then put it in the shortest amount of words. So just one or two sentences maybe, or even just one sentence. And then synthesizing is even cooler. That's when you combine what you already know with what you're learning, and then you draw a conclusion to make some new meaning from the text. And we'll work on that after we find our important information. So this first paragraph here is actually one of our text features because it's in italics. It's not part of the speech, but it kind of gives us some background knowledge. And it says, in 1870, the 15th Amendment to the Constitution gave African American men the right to vote. However, after nearly a century, African Americans still faced practices that kept them from exercising this right. President Lyndon Johnson gave a speech to Congress on March 15, 1965. In this, he called for an end to discrimination against Black voters. So here are some excerpts or parts from the speech. And before I get into the official speech, I do want to show you there is one word that I am not going to say because this word was okay back when President Lyndon gave his speech, but it's a very, very outdated word, and all it means is Black person. So I'm just going to use the term Black person instead of that word because it'll just make me feel better. So let's go ahead and dive into this text and see what important information we can underline. So it says, I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy. So that's a very poetic way to say that he wants to speak tonight to make sure all men feel that dignity, that self-worth, right? That honor and respect for themselves. And he's also speaking about the destiny of democracy, because democracy is very linked to every citizen having a voice. And the way we express our opinions is usually through voting, right? So he's talking about making sure every person in America feels worthy and making sure that democracy is being held up in the sense that every person's voice is heard. So our second little paragraph says, I urge every member of both parties, Americans of all religions and of all colors from every section of this country, to join me in that cause. So I'm going to underline the first part. I urge every member of both parties to join me in that cause, because that really gets to the heart of it. He just wants everyone united in this cause. And then our next paragraph says, at times history and fate meet at a single time in a single place to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. So what he's saying is he's noticing that right now is the perfect time to make a change that might make the citizens of our country even more free than we were at the time. Because if some people's voice is being heard, but other people's voice aren't, then everybody's not quite free yet. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that sentence. After that, it says, so it was at Lexington and Concord. Oh, so he's giving some examples. So Lexington and Concord was a place where one of our battles of the Revolutionary War was fought. And it says, so it was a century ago at Appomattox. Appomattox, he's talking about, that's the courthouse where General Lee surrendered to General Grant at the end of the Civil War. And then he says, so it was last week in Selma, Alabama. There is no Black person problem. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem. So he's saying if there's ever any discrimination happening, if any Black citizens anywhere in the country are being denied the right to vote, then it's not just that area's problem, it's the entire country's problem. This next paragraph says, and we are met here tonight as Americans, not as Democrats or Republicans. We are met here as Americans to solve that problem. So I'm going to underline that one because he's trying again to emphasize he wants us to be united in this. He doesn't want us to be divided. We all needed to have the same opinion. And then this last paragraph says, this was the first nation in the history of the world to be founded with a purpose. The great phrases of that purpose still sound in every American heart, North and South. All men are created equal. Government by the people, by of the governed. Give me liberty or give me death. So really the most important of those is all men are created equal, because that was his big point. If we aren't equal, then what are we trying to do? What is the Constitution about, right? So we say this thing, we're all created equal, but then the actions of people aren't proving that because they're not letting everybody vote. So if I was going to come up with a summary to go with this first part of the speech, all 5 of these paragraphs that I just read are included in the main introduction of his speech. So he's really just trying to lay out the problem here. So what I can say is, in his speech, President Johnson tries to unite the country into working for equality. And he thinks the way to equality, the best way to achieve equality is to make sure all citizens can vote. Boom. I wonder if I could, yes. There we go. Trying to fix my formatting just a bit. There we go. So then my notes are over there. So I want you to add this same summary in the margin. So go ahead and do that now, please. And next we'll look at this paragraph and get some important information and see if you all can come up with a good summary for this. It says, those words are a promise to every citizen that he shall share in the dignity of man. This dignity cannot be found in man's possessions. It cannot be found in his power or in his position. It really rests on his right to be treated as a man equal in opportunity to all others. It says that he shall share in freedom. He shall choose his leaders, educate his children, provide for his family according to his ability and his merits as a human being. So when I think about the most important parts of that, he's talking about the dignity of man, that the honor and respect and self-worth that people should feel if they have that dignity. So he's talking about that he shall share in the dignity of man. So he's talking about those words, all men are created equal, right? Those are the words that he's referring to. And I want to underline this one that says, the dignity of man rests in his right to be treated as a man equal in opportunity to all others. It says that he shall share in freedom. So when we think about a good summary, it should include both of these ideas, but in a shorter way. Okay, so see if you can pick the best summary. Once you've picked the best one, I want you to also write it out here in the margin. Okay, so go ahead and try that. Okay, hopefully you picked the right summary. I'm going to go ahead and type it up right here. So the summary that I came up with, because we are talking about equality and dignity, right? So our summary has to include both of those ideas. Man's dignity connected to his right to be treated like all other citizens and share the same freedoms. Don't need a apostrophe there. Let me get my formatting right here. And we're good. Hopefully you got that one as we went through. Let's go to the next one. Many of the issues of civil rights are very complex and most difficult, but about this, there can and should be no argument. Every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. There is no reason which can excuse the denial of that right. There is no duty which weighs more heavily on us than the duty we have to ensure that right. So let's go ahead and underline the most important information. Every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. There is no duty which weighs more heavily on us. He's talking about on the government then the duty we have to ensure that right. So you're going to get some choices. Let's see if you can pick the best summary. All right. Hopefully you remembered that we had to include a little bit of info from each of these. So I'm going to make it the government's most important duty is to ensure that every citizen has the right to vote. Hopefully that was the one you picked because it had information from both of those sentences that we underlined. So now we just have a few paragraphs left. Let's put these two together and do one more summary. So it says, yet the harsh fact is that in many places in this country, men and women are kept from voting simply because they are Black people. Experience has clearly shown that the existing process of law cannot overcome systematic and ingenious discrimination. No law that we now have on the books, and I have helped to put 3 of them there, can ensure the right to vote when local officials are determined to deny it. In such a case, our duty must be clear to all of us. The Constitution says that no person shall be kept from voting because of his race or his color. We have all sworn an oath before God to support and defend that Constitution. We must now act in obedience to that oath. So let's go ahead. Show the right to vote. Constitution. So experience has shown that the existing process of law cannot, hold on. Sorry, don't underline those. Just kidding. I think we really just need these last few. The Constitution says that no person shall be kept from voting because of his race or his color. We have all sworn an oath before God to support and defend that Constitution. We must now act in obedience to that oath. Okay, so see if you can come up with the right summary, and then we'll jot it down in the margin. Okay, so when we talk about we, that's really the Congress, right, or the government. So we're going to say again, the government, let's say the people of the government have sworn to protect the Constitution which states all citizens can vote regardless of race or color. All right, that should be the best summary for that one. The last thing we're going to do is a little synthesizing real quick. So again, that's combining what you know with what you're learning to draw a conclusion and make a little bit of new meaning from the text. So maybe you didn't realize, what an issue this was at the time because you all haven't gotten to that part in social studies, and that's okay. But now that we do know that there was all this discrimination, is this something that we would need to fix? Is this something that you don't think would have been that much of a problem? If so, you could use this first sentence frame. I used to think this, but now I think this. And we're going to have, you can decide where you want to put it. I'm going to do one more thing in the margin, one more notes, and it's just going to say synthesis. I'm going to say since, and this is my synthesis. I want you to kind of come up with your own. Since the text shows how wrong it was to discriminate. Whoa. There we go. Against Black voters, I think the law should have been changed. All right. So hopefully that made it clear kind of what your synthesis needs to be. I look forward to checking it out when I come around. Remember, a synthesis isn't hard. It's just you adding your thoughts to what you learned in the text. So as long as you've got that I think somewhere in there, you should be good. Hopefully you learned a lot about the Voting Rights Act, and I look forward to checking out your syntheses, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.